I'm saying if you want, I could just talk. Okay, so the thing is, Seth, is look, when I think of Cell, like I look at him like through his whole evolution.
Right.
So if you want to just use Boo and Boo's whole evolution from like the big Jiggly all the way up to like Kid Boo, like I don't mind.
Okay. Yeah. So why is Cell a better villain than Kid Boo, man?
Are we actually like going now, or are you ready to start? Okay. So first of all, when it comes to Cell, Cell has significantly more character. Like Kid Buu is what I would consider he's a non-cerebral villain where he's just a force of nature. He adds nothing to the Dragon Ball series. He blew up a planet simply because he felt like it. When he fought against Goku, there was no dialogue between Goku and Kid Buu that added towards the actual fight. They literally just fought. Whereas when Cell fought against characters, their dialogue actually made the situation a lot better. For example, Gohan's fight with Cell accomplished two things. Gohan's fight with Cell brought out Gohan's potential, and you could see that Cell had invested interest in Gohan's power, whereas Gohan was also explaining why he didn't want to fight personally and how he's different from his father. So right then and there, Dragon Ball is establishing a dynamic between Gohan as a character and Cell as a character versus Goku and Kid Buu, where it's just, hey, you're just a pink chewing gum, let's fight each other. And it was a great fight, don't get me wrong, I love Goku versus Kid Buu, but that fight didn't have the same long-lasting impact on the Dragon Ball franchise than Cell versus a variety of characters did.
Well, that's not true.
So I guess that's my initial point.
Kid Buu is the main factor that Vegeta and Goku became friends. You're aware of that, right?
I disagree with that, but why? What's your point?
It definitely was. The entire concept of the Saiyans was that the Saiyans like to fight on their own, right? Vegeta constantly told Goku, no, we're not fusing. We're not going to fuse unless certain things happen. And Vegeta's development with Majin Buu obviously changed him as a whole as it went on. And then by the end of it, they fused to fight Buuhan. And Buuhan, as a character, has way better dialogue. And he also has, honestly, him as a villain is way more polarizing than Cell, because not only is he the other fighters he's absorbed, but he knows everything they know. So he knows these people personally, and he's still bent on torturing and killing them. And for me, that is way more cynical in my opinion. And I do think his character's better. We also saw that he had better development. When he got humbled by Vegito, he was able to accept that he was inferior, despite the fact that he was claiming he was omnipotent and whenever he won. But he was able to accept he was humble whenever he got beaten by Vegito, right? He's using his techniques far more efficiently. He was a far more creative villain than Cell was. Cell seemed to be more of a flesh out of Frieza when it came to like the way that their characters acted. And with the whole Vegeta being befriended by Goku thing, this definitely was established inside the insides of Super Buu. And that was something that Cell could not accomplish, in my opinion. Cell never pushed the Z Fighters to the point where they needed fusion or to surpass the Super Saiyan forms or anything of the sort. So I feel like the caliber of the series was definitely affected way more by Buu. If you look at Super, most of the forms and things that are happening, a lot of it is due to the Buu saga and the things they learned there, and pretty much Gohan's whole like power up and character arc is due to the fact that he had to fight Super Buu. From there as well, we also get the dynamic that Goku gets character development from Buu. At first, he's originally bent on training Gohan and the kids to fight Buu or whatever, and then it gets to the point where he's like, okay, you know what, maybe we should fight Buu on our own, right? Maybe like I should fight Buu on my own. I should prove myself as a Saiyan warrior. And that was his way of evolving to befriend Vegeta later in Super. And that's also why they fought Jiren by themselves as well. But
okay. Do you want me to rebut to that, or you still want to make points?
You can rebut to that if you want. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm trying to like remember every single exact point you made, but starting off with Kid Buu, the dynamic where you said that Goku and Vegeta became friends because of Kid Buu, I never said first Kid of all, Buu. I think that's
I just said Buu in general.
Okay. Well, first of all, I think that's an unfair argument because the way the story was structured, Goku died when Cell in the Cell arc. So if Goku and Cell and Vegeta were to ever become friends during the Android arc, it would have been impossible because Goku is dead. So hold on. Let me just make one point. In addition, though, even despite the fact that Goku and Vegeta did become closer after the Buu arc, I'm not arguing with that. I do want to say that there was major character development for Vegeta's character in the Cell arc that I think you might be discounting. First of all, Vegeta was willing to help Goku's son, which is a major character transition throughout the series, because up until that point, Vegeta only cared about himself. He didn't care about his child. He didn't care about Gohan. In that same arc, Vegeta risked his life to try and defend a son that was already dead, and also helped out Goku's child. So he helped out his rival son, and he helped out his own son. In addition to this, we also see
that was
Vegeta,
only a flash of character development, though.
But it still not character development though?
It wasn't very good because
it would set up because it would set up
it reverted to zero, like it didn't exist.
Okay, but that would obviously lead up to what led to the Buu saga, because guess what happens during the Buu arc? Before the Buu arc even begins, what did we learn what happened over those 7 years? Over those 7 years, right?
I don't think that's even that big of a character transition anyway, because he was already willing to help Krillin and Gohan just to fight Frieza too. He's always been willing to do that.
Okay, but that was for his own selfish ambitions.
Yeah, exactly. It's basically very similar to the Cell games, right? He has this moment, he's in the heat of the moment, and then it just goes away. Whereas versus Super Buu, it did not go away; it retained.
Okay, but let me ask you this though, Seth. So after those 7 years, what was Vegeta at the very beginning of the Buu arc? He softened up. He was a family man. He was taking Trunks over to a park. And that all spurred because of the development that was happening throughout Vegeta's character. So what I'm saying is you're picking Vegeta when his character was the most changed and saying that's the most changed character, but you're discounting the build-up that led to Vegeta changing. Because the Cell arc led up to the Buu arc, and in the Cell arc...
But you could just argue the Frieza arc also led up to the Cell games as well.
Right, so but that's the point.
Exactly,
if you're talking about
but Buu was the most polarizing. Like, he had the most influence over Vegeta. Vegeta still, honestly, didn't want to be a good guy when the Buu saga started. He kind of didn't like what he had going on, and Buu helped him snap out of that. So no, I think Buu was far more polarizing in that category. Also, I just wanted to ask, what do you think a good villain is? Don't you think a good villain is someone that changes the characters?
Yes, and I think the Android. Okay, hold on. But I actually think the Android arc in general changed the entire Dragon Ball cast more than any series in the history of the franchise. Do you want me to go into explaining why?
Well, we're going to go back to what we did before.
Okay.
Where we split the Android and Cell arcs, right?
Okay.
Yeah, that's like
that's
like me saying like the fusion.
Them as 4 main arcs, but okay, fine.
Yeah, I definitely split the Android arc in the... Because the Android arc, obviously, the main antagonists of the Android arc are mainly the androids, right? Not really Cell. So I don't really think the Android arc should be linked together with that, in my personal opinion.
I mean, okay, I guess if you want to be technical, fine. But I'm saying, in general, the Android arc, because, I mean, there's also parts of the Buu arc where Buu didn't even exist. You know what I'm saying? So
well,
it's
at the very beginning of the Buu saga, sure.
Right.
But so Buu, the problem with Buu is that Buu is very... I mean, it's literally called the Buu arc, right? Buu is very prevalent at, like, the end of the Buu arc, and then he's pretty much the entire Fusion saga.
Okay.
So, well, yeah. He's definitely very pivotal. For
either way, if you want to split the Android arc versus the Cell arc, it honestly doesn't matter, because I think the major points are still going to be the same. That I will make at least. All right, so if you want me to go into why I think the Android arc developed characters more than anything, in general, just the Android arc as a whole leading up to Cell. Okay, so first of all, if you want to go down the list, if you ever played Legacy of Goku 2, right, I'm sure you have, the 5 main characters of Piccolo, Gohan, Trunks, Vegeta, and Goku all had a significant role within that arc. Something that Dragon Ball has never had.
Did you just list a video game? Is that what just happened? Did you just list a video game?
No, I'm just using Legacy of Goku 2 as an example, because like those were the 5 core characters, the same way it was in the Android arc. Okay. Those were the 5 playable characters plus Mr. Satan. That was just a reference.
Okay.
So, going with those 5 characters, Piccolo, because of fighting against Android 17 and 18, yes, you could say they're not a part of Cell, but then what we see later on where Piccolo encounters Cell, Piccolo was a significant character in that arc, because if had it not been for Piccolo, we wouldn't have found out all this information about who Cell was. So in Piccolo, and not in addition to this, Piccolo fusing with Kami gained the knowledge of Kami, and Piccolo was able to swallow his own pride and fuse with a person that he didn't even really like for the benefit of the
He didn't do that for Cell, though. He did that for the androids.
No, he didn't do it for Cell, but that's why I brought up the point, though. I'm bringing up the point for the whole arc.
So Cell was very abysmal for Piccolo.
Right, I understand that, but what I'm saying is I'm bringing up the point for the whole arc with the androids, and then I'm also bringing up how it was also important that Piccolo was the one that figured out all the information about Cell, because had they not found out that information, the entire arc would have been completely different.
Sure.
So with that, Piccolo pretty much gets all the information from Cell. Now that's one major reason Piccolo impacted the plot. Gohan was obviously the key character in the end. No need to go into that. Goku became more of a mentor in this arc and was passing the keys and the torch over to Gohan. Trunks, I mean, there's no need to go into why Trunks was important. And then Vegeta was obviously very important because of his character development. So find me an arc in Dragon Ball where 5 characters were that important to the plot all at once.
The Buu Saga.
Okay, find me the 5 characters.
Okay, Goten, Trunks, Goku, Vegeta, Gohan,
right,
and
2
Piccolo.
characters that did virtually 2 characters that were completely useless until they fused. When they fused, they fucked up.
They were very important.
Okay, so how are Goten and Trunks
because
important?
Goten and Trunks were basically the philosophy of Goku. So Goku had this philosophy that I shouldn't be brought back to life, right? He's like, the torch should be passed on. And he passed this on to Goten and Trunks. And Goten and Trunks failing as Gotenks was the perfect arbiter of why Goku should not do what he was trying to do, which is why he changed his methods versus Kid Buu later on. It was actually for Goku's character development that Gotenks happened. And they were very important versus Super Buu as well. Not only were they very important in this arc, but they actually fought the main villain on equal footing, which you never see really anywhere else. Like, you never really see them fight a powerful incarnation of a main villain as a side character. It's really unseen. Yeah. And yet there were so many characters that did it in the Buu arc, because in the Buu arc, all of these seemingly side characters were really in the spotlight, and that was never really seen. So, no, I do think that even Goten and Trunks were extremely important, and they also bought time for Gohan to evolve. The Supreme Kai was also extremely important in this arc. Even the Elder Kai was extremely important in this arc. There were so many things that were important in this arc that I really just don't see why you're disregarding these side characters of the Buu arc.
So I guess, Seth, at this point, are we going to just turn this into an Android arc versus Buu arc debate? Because if we do that, we can expand this a lot more.
No, that's just generally how you went down. That's why,
Well, because, I mean, if we're just talking about Buu versus Cell, fine. So
it should be their influence over the characters.
Right, okay, fine. Because if we do that, I can have even more points to go off of. But if we're just sticking
obviously the Android Cell arc versus the Buu versus Fusion arc is obviously its own thing. So we should try to find a way to articulate it better.
Okay, so to counter that point you made, did you mute yourself or...
No, I'm here. I just don't want to.
Okay.
Also, are we changing the format up a little bit, or are you just countering
exactly I just think we're just talking. I mean, I don't give a shit, bro.
Okay. We can
All right, so I just want to counter that point you made there. Okay, so you were talking about Goten and Trunks. Okay, so yeah, Goten and Trunks had an influence over the Buu arc. Yeah, they made it worse. My points, then let me explain to you why they made it worse. First of all, since after Goku fought against Fat Buu, the entire arc fell down a cliff. Why did this happen? Okay, first of all, Goten and Trunks dragged out of the entire Buu arc, the pacing completely fucking dragged from the inception of Goten and Trunks' characters. Toriyama had to find ways to stall Buu into not doing anything by making Piccolo walk around, and just try to stall him off. In addition to this, he had to make them go into the Room of Spirit and Time. In addition to this, he had to have Goten and Trunks stay into the Room of Spirit and Time and then scream their way out of it while all of their friends were dead. In addition to this, he also had to find an excuse for Gohan to be on another planet to have another fight because he didn't trust. So right there, Seth, the fact that Gotenks did not defeat Super Buu tells you... The fact that Gotenks didn't defeat Super Buu tells you how much faith Toriyama had in them defeating him as a character, because he knows that
was never the intention.
Okay, I understand.
The intention of Goten and Trunks was to bring back old Dragon Ball flair.
Right, I know, the old comic gag humor, but I'm saying it didn't work for the Buu arc because the arc was already... Dragon Ball as a whole was developing to a much more serious tone.
But it did work, though.
Okay, how did it work?
You don't think Gotenks became an extremely popular character?
He became popular, but does popular mean good? Broly's popular, does that mean he's a good character?
Hold on. You're misinterpreting what I'm saying. By popular here, we just mean, was it liked? Right? So we're just talking about, was the gag aspect liked by people? And yes, it was, because Buu himself was an extremely goofy gag character. So basically, Gotenks was his good guy parallel, and that's why it was such a good fight to have. Now, the whole stalling thing was also a gag within itself, and it was a gag that he repeated with Elder Kai as well. But there was obviously, and honestly, these lighthearted comic relief moments, they also amplify the more serious moments like Ultimate Gohan coming in, etc. So no, I think that's actually good writing for Buu.
Okay,
I don't think that's bad.
but here's the thing, though, Seth, and see, when you compare original Dragon Ball to Dragon Ball Z, there's a major stark difference, right? So in early Dragon Ball, when there's
I
more
wasn't
gag
saying they were
humor,
the same, man.
right? I understand that, but I'm saying, but I'm using it to bring up the point about the Buu arc. So when you go back to early Dragon Ball with Goku fighting against the Pilaf gang and Boss Rabbit, and you know the goofy Red Ribbon Army, where Commander Red, his whole wish was just to turn himself into a taller guy. That gag humor works for like that when the villains are goofy and silly and don't have that much power. When you're talking about intergalactic characters where lives are on the line, it's a completely different case. So the contrast between having this kid with all the power in the world fighting against this pink monster, but then
that's part of the humor, exactly.
Right,
because this pink super monster or whatever wants to destroy the whole universe and turn people into candy. And these kids are just dicking around. That's always been Toriyama's style. What do you mean? Like the whole point was that was actually Goku's main like gag, is that he was a little kid that would just slap these ultra serious fighters around or whatever. That was literally that was literally the whole point. It was basically just a callback to that. And no, I think it was still good.
Right, but Seth, the thing is, I think we're making two different points though. I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying there. What I'm saying is that in Dragon Ball Z, where the stakes have become significantly greater and characters are dying left and right because a child doesn't want to turn Super Saiyan 3 to scream his way out of a hyperbolic time chamber. How does that compare to all of the character development in the Cell arc? And let me just go on to another point here, Seth, unless you want to rebuttal.
No, I want to rebuttal. Because I think these high stakes increase the level of humor. And I have reason for this. So, have you ever read One Punch Man?
Yes, I've watched most of the anime.
I've
watched the whole anime. I haven't read the whole thing.
You know what people find the best part about Saitama?
When he kills everybody in one punch.
When he beats the ultra big bad guy in one punch. And this is actually further exaggerated with the human monster Garo fight, right? Where he's giving him a speech like, what do you care about winning? What do you care about being a hero? He's giving really good arguments for why Saitama beating him shouldn't mean anything. You'd think logically Saitama shouldn't want to beat Garo because he has no reasoning to. And then Saitama just obliterates him in one punch and says, cause I like to, or something. You just said because it's my hobby. That was the comedy. So no, in Japan, this seems to be a very trending theme with good comedy. I think high stakes and goofing off is actually good.
So would you? All right, that's fine. I understand. If that was following the original theme of Dragon Ball, I would completely agree with that.
It was just Goten. If it was like Goku started dicking off and then got everything obliterated after like his years of character development, then you might have a case that's bad writing, right? But it's Goten and Trunks who are like 8 years old or something. So no, I think it makes a lot of sense. It's actually really good humor in my opinion. No,
okay, well, you could say it added a lot of humor, but I think one of the points that you completely ignored, Seth, is the fact that the pacing of that entire arc, and I've talked to Geekdom about this, that entire arc's pacing fell down a fucking cliff when Goten and Trunks became the core characters.
I don't think that's Boo's fault, though. That's definitely not Boo's fault.
But Boo is part of the arc. Because
So just because he's part of the arc doesn't mean that it's his fault that Toriyama can't write around.
But think about the kind of character it is. Boo is such a mindless directionalist character that Toriyama could use that as an advantage to intentionally slow down the plot for Goten and Trunks.
But that was subtle because he wasn't actually mindless, and we learned that later on.
Okay,
Boo is actually extremely cynical, and he usually plans these things in ahead. And the whole reason he even fought Gotenks numerous times was so that he could absorb him to beat the shit out of Gohan. That was literally the entire time that happened. So no, Boo is actually more aware than he lets off. So I think that these boring moments not only exaggerate the good moments, the humor, but it also exaggerates Boo's like intelligence later on when it's revealed. Because he seems so mindless earlier on.
So at the beginning of the arc, so let me just counter by illustrating this here. So at the beginning of the arc, it all started off with gag humor with the Saiyaman. Then we transition over to when Vegeta sacrifices himself against Fat Boo. So we see one of the core iconic characters in Dragon Ball history blows himself up to a character that still survived. Then after this, we see Goku fighting him as a Super Saiyan 3. So obviously, from the very beginning of the Buu arc, we can see major things happening. Vegeta dies, Goku goes Super Saiyan 3, Gohan's teleported to another planet. Then when Goten and Trunks come around, okay, well, you could say it adds humor, but Dragon Ball can create what I think you're missing, Seth, is that Dragon Ball can create humor without having to reduce the pacing. For example, in the Goku versus Kid Buu fight in the anime adaptation, there were a lot of funny moments where like Goku and Kid Buu like bit each other, and then when Kid Buu is using his candy technique, that's all fun and dandy. But pacing
that's not gag based like Gotenks would be.
Okay, but
you're not understanding that Toriyama was trying to tell a different type of story briefly with that.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is
it was actually clever writing, and it's seen in very other successful, well-written manga that use similar things.
Okay. Well, you're calling it good writing, but I think dragging out an entire arc for characters that eventually did nothing in the grand scheme of things other than to power up the very same enemy that they were fighting against means that essentially they were useless characters.
Well, I think that only just shows to Buu's versatility and how great he was. Even though someone like, say, the equivalent of Super Saiyan 2 Gohan appears before Cell, right? Just starts cocking on him to the point where Cell just like loses himself and self-destructs. Whereas Buu retains his sanity. He retains these traits, and he's constantly thinking ahead. How am I going to destroy this guy much more powerful than me? And so all of these moments we see leading up to these, all of these things you call bad writing or questionable, are actually very good because it's Buu articulating strategies around the Z Fighters that we've never seen before. Because every other villain that's fought the Z Fighters, even despite how smart people think they are, have all had worse and dumber strategies than the mindless Buu. So I think it was actually just exaggerating how mysterious and quirky he was, actually. So no, I think these are all very good.
So you think it was brilliant that Buu created a piece of chewing gum to absorb two kids that are never on guard anyways, and who intentionally drag out a fight. So congratulations to Majin Buu.
He intentionally dragged it out too. Because the point was that Super Buu was stronger than Gotenks. Actually, it was verbatim stated that Super Buu was only scared of Gohan. He always thought he could destroy Gotenks whenever he wanted. In fact, the whole reason he absorbed Gotenks for Gohan is because he's like, no one can be stronger than me. So he never thought Gotenks was stronger than he was, and he never tried to prove.
Well, Seth, no offense, but you're kind of contradicting yourself, because in that very same moment, right before Toriyama brilliantly wrote Goten and Trunks defusing in Deus Ex Machina right before they defeated Super Buu, Gotenks was on the verge of actually killing him. Well, how do you know that?
Because Super Buu constantly was okay with them refusing and fighting him. No, there was even after that, when Gohan appeared, Buu really just stated, no, I was just only letting them buy time for when you got here. So he was just toying with them. There was no point. It may have seemed like they might have beaten him, but there's no proof they would have beaten him in that situation. For all we know, they could have launched a Kamehameha and he could have just reformed. It's literally like, okay, so you have Goku versus Kid Buu. And even though Goku is on par with Kid Buu, and it's stated Super Buu and Gotenks are like on par or relative. So even though Goku's like relative to this suppressed Kid Buu, he's not able to obliterate Kid Buu even if he engulfs his body with a Super Kamehameha. So no, I don't see any moment in which Gotenks would have actually obliterated Super Buu.
Hold on, but what you're saying was completely contradicted by what Piccolo said. So we all agree with this, right, Seth? That when in writing in general, in any work of fiction, when a character says something, that is to inspire the audience to believe what that character is saying, right? So when Piccolo was making that statement to Gotenks that the reason why Super Buu is going crazy is because he's never fought somebody strong like you, and you broke his ego.
But that was versus Gohan, wasn't it? When did
no, that was against Gotenks.
Hold on, when was
that? He was talking about Gotenks. That was right before it was, and I'll tell you the exact scene too. That was in that scene where, like, after Gotenks, like, you did that volleyball technique, and then Buu was like underground, and then like Piccolo popped up and he's like, Buu's never fought somebody like you before. So right then and there, Piccolo is pretty much saying, a character who knows these characters well, that Super Buu was obviously somewhat threatened.
We know that these characters are constantly wrong, though. Like, their statements can't always be interpreted as literal. And then also, we then learned later on that Super Buu was, in fact, letting them refuse and coming back again and again for Gohan. So if Buu is really pressed as a keyboard, hold on, don't interrupt.
What I'm getting at there, Seth, is that you're differentiating.
If you think Super Buu was as pressed as you think he was,
in reality, it's not.
Then why did he let them refuse?
You're calling Gotenks randomly diffused.
You cut out.
You're calling that good writing. So essentially, Toriyama. Okay.
Sorry.
What you're saying is you're calling all of this good writing, but in reality, it's just ruining the arc with horrible pacing.
Well, Gotenks defusing isn't really Yeah, that's not really
Okay,
Boo's
so
fault. That's
Toriyama
more like
always
that's more
finds
like
an
a
excuse.
Goten and Trunks problem.
So it's good writing that Toriyama always finds an excuse to diffuse Goten and Trunks whenever the plot is getting interesting.
No,
He's using his
I
own
think
fusion.
what he was using is like he was trying to use it as tension.
He's using his own fusion as a crux to bring in new characters because he's trying to find other ways to bring characters.
So for instance, like so you have this glaring beacon of hope, right? You have Gotenks.
Okay.
It's seemingly like he's gonna obliterate Super Buu, right? And this might be it. But then he defuses. Right? He defuses right on the spot. This is a common tool to build tension. It's like, wait, oh fuck, you know, Gotenks is gone, you know, what's going to happen next?
Okay.
It's a common tool.
Yeah, it's creating tension, but it's completely distorting the direction of the arc. So we're watching Gotenks develop. We're watching, okay, well the whole so Seth, you're saying, okay, so Goten and Trunks are supposed to be these popular, important characters of the arc. We're seeing them get all the development, but Super Buu screams his way out of the
they were more important as like a joke.
Okay.
They weren't really important to the main narrative. Does that make sense?
Okay, so you're agreeing that they weren't important to the main narrative, and you're also agreeing
like I meant like they were never intended to like defeat Buu or anything.
So you're making my points then. So they weren't intended to defeat Super Buu, and in reality, all they did was ruined the pacing.
if they beat Super Buu, then it would have ruined Goku's development as a character. So of course he wanted to beat.
Okay, so Goku needs way more development as a character, right? Because in the very same arc
he
before
got it
that,
from
Gohan,
Buu. because
so in the very same.
Win.
Okay, so Seth, you're making my points then, because in the very same arc before this, we see that Gohan and Vegeta had major character development in defeating the main villain, where Goku wasn't even necessary. So we have an arc where we don't even need the main character to defeat the main villain.
You mean
but
Gohan?
Yet this arc, oh well, we need Goku to come beat Kid Buu over again.
Well,
and let's
Goku didn't beat Kid Buu. Goku couldn't beat Kid Buu.
Okay, but what I'm saying is Goku.
That
Goku
goes back to
still...
I gave you the meta narrative argument for that one. No, that was about the morality of humanity versus the immorality of like nature.
No, Seth, I'm just using your own points, okay? Because you just said if Gotenks defeated Super Buu, let's just go with that point. You said if Gotenks defeated Super Buu, right?
Okay.
Then Goku wouldn't have been able to get that development, right?
Okay.
Okay, my argument is that does Goku really need character development as compared to other characters that we've never seen before in the Dragon Ball series?
Like
in
what?
the very same arc, hold on, let me just finish this point. In the very same arc before this, like I said, Gohan, Piccolo, Vegeta, Trunks, and Goku all got development. So when you have an opportunity to develop
all
Goten
those characters did get development.
Right, but in this arc, guess what happens? When Goten and Trunks are about to do something awesome, they always defuse because Toriyama realizes how useless they are in the long run.
Yes, and they also realized that they weren't as strong as they thought they were. Like, the point of Gotenks 2 is that Gotenks' development and Goten and Trunks' development is that they always thought they were the strongest for some reason, and like throughout the arc, they constantly keep learning that there are people above them, including Gotenks.
Right,
and Gotenks had to learn that a really hard way, and that was with Gohan mainly. They had to learn that Gohan was stronger than them, and obviously if they defeated Buu before that, they wouldn't have learned that. So no, I actually think that was development for them as well. There was numerous reasons for Goten and Trunks not winning. And the reason, and also, not only was it important for Goku, but it was important for Vegeta's character as well. It was also important for Gohan's character as well. And that was mainly touched up more in Super, but obviously his ego thing, which was a flaw in the Cell Saga too. But yeah, so no, I do think them not winning was just some writing strategy. I don't think it means anything.
Okay. Well, I have a lot of points to counter about what you're saying about all the future characters, because one of the biggest problems with the Buu arc that I've talked to my friends about the most is the fact that Toriyama pulled the most ass pulls in that fucking arc than it did in the history of Dragon Ball. Okay. I'll give you a numerous amount of examples.
Well, that just shows the power of Buu, though, right? That just shows how how versatile and how much of a threat he is. Because they have to keep pulling out all these bullshit to beat him. It just shows how great of a villain he really was.
Well, I'm not talking about power. I'm talking about just characters coming back. Let me give you an example. Okay, so Goku was dead, but he comes back for a day. Fine, no problem. Okay, but then the old Kai gives his life up to bring Goku back to life, even though all of the other Supreme Kais that died before, where the hell did they go when they died, even though the old Kai stayed on the Supreme Kai planet? Either way, just adding that point, that's just one point, Seth.
Well, that has nothing to do with Super Buu.
Okay, well, let's also bring up the fact that, hey, let's also use that same rule for Goku coming back from a day just to bring Vegeta back into the story to eventually beat Super Buu. Do you see the pattern that Toriyama had? He kept finding excuses to bring characters back to fight against Buu because it's poor writing and poor pacing.
Well, no, I honestly just think that Buu evolved so much as a character that Toriyama had no choice but to keep bringing these characters back to complete their characters as well.
But no choice doesn't mean good.
Wait, hold on. Just because they get brought back and it's detrimental to the arc does not mean it's bad for their characters. I think a villain, as long as it's developing the characters properly, is still okay.
So you're agreeing that it's detrimental to the arc, but you're saying it's not bad for the character.
I think the character is the focus of the Buu arc, yeah.
Okay, so you're agreeing that it's detrimental to the arc.
Well, we're arguing characters, right?
Right, but the character has an impact on the arc.
Well, like, for instance, the only thing with the Cell games is that, like, the whole arc of it was defeat Cell at the Cell games, right? That was pretty much the whole thing. Whereas Buu is far more, he was far more complicated. There was a lot more steps going into it. It was kind of like, I
completely disagree, but okay.
Well, okay, explain why. Why was there more steps?
Well, let me ask you first, what do you mean by complex?
So, for instance, like, Buu's power kept obviously evolving from the beginning. Cell's didn't. Cell stayed stagnant. Whenever a character would get a power-up, Buu would be able to move around it because he was probably the smartest villain in Z. There was numerous things that made Buu a good villain that the characters couldn't use their normal bullshit strategies to get around, which is why so many evolutions of different things came about. Also, it also included new transformations, new power-ups, new moves. It wasn't just the same fleshed out, like, Frieza Saga ending Android arc bullshit where they just all went Super Saiyan to defeat their opponent or a stronger form of Super Saiyan.
Okay. So, now, you bring up, the Buu arc came up with all these ideas, but all these ideas...
So, yeah, how did they defeat Cell? Yeah, how did they defeat Cell, man?
Okay, well, hold on. Let me counter your point about like how you said Cell, like Buu is more complex than Cell first. Okay. Because I have a lot of stuff I want to say, and then I'll counter that other point. So just remind me. Okay. So first of all, when Fat Buu, leading up to eventually Super Buu and Kid Buu, was introduced, would we all agree, Seth, that Buu was the strongest character in Dragon Ball when he was initially introduced?
Like when he
the strongest character on Earth, like not counting Goku with Super Saiyan 3 because we didn't know he had Super Saiyan 3. So when
Fat Buu first started waddling around, he was weaker than Goku and Vegeta. But like when he started powering up versus Majin Vegeta, he became the strongest.
Okay, what I'm saying is, in general, Buu was always the main threat from the very beginning, right? We would agree with this, right?
Okay.
I'm bringing that to point out that Buu as a complete character is way less complex than Cell ever was. Why do I bring this up? First of all, Cell had to kill Trunks even to get to the main timeline that we come up with in the first place. So we have a character that is smart enough to identify that his evolution requires him to kill a character, steal his time machine, and go back in time. That, by its very conception, is way more complex than anything that ever existed with Majin Buu. And let me just add one more point before you rebuttal here, Seth.
Okay.
When you look at Cell as a character, when he was introduced, he was not that powerful. He had to sneak around the Earth, absorb people and androids just to compete with his competition, whereas Buu was always the main threat that everybody had to train and fuse and get stronger than. So from the very beginning, we have a villain that was weaker. How often do you see that in Dragon Ball, where a villain was weaker than the main characters that he fought against and had to get strong enough to fight his competition, as opposed to the characters were already weaker than the villain and they had to get stronger to beat him? When has Dragon Ball done that?
But it's happened to Buu a few times. Buu got dominated numerous times. But yeah, he didn't start off as the weakest. But he did get dominated numerous times. And the main point I was making, right? So this is my two premises. So the two premises for this one is, one, Buu was more interesting because they had to develop new techniques and way more interesting concepts to defeat him rather than need stronger Super Saiyan. And two, I said Buu after he reached his higher stages and even after getting dominated. So, for example, we talked about Cell's development, right? It's not really like his... It's kind of character development, but it's kind of not. Because it's kind of more like he's just turning into how he actually wants to act. But he just couldn't before because he knew he was, like, weak or not perfect. Whatever. But with Buu, even when he reached his pinnacles, he still understood how to... strategize around his opponent, and that's why more and more bullshit had to come in on him, because despite his weaknesses or his inferiority to a far more dominant opponent, he still was able to find ways around it, which Cell was not, which is why I found him a more interesting villain as well.
Okay, well, I have a lot of things that I want to counter to that.
Yeah.
Man, I don't even know where to begin. Okay, so first of all, okay, when we talk about Cell's development as a character, right?
It's a very shifty thing, but yeah.
Okay, so when we talk about Cell's development as a character, I always bring up how his character evolved from his imperfect form all the way up into his perfect form. When you talk about strategy and outsmarting his opponents, he outsmarted Piccolo, who outsmarted him, right? On top of that, in addition to this,
that's not sequitur. That's not sequitur. It's not sequitur because I was talking about like when they're in their more egotistical forms, right? When you think they're more in their more perfected stages, they still Buu was still strategizing, whereas Cell kind of devolved as a character, right? Because from what you're describing, I think first form Cell is a better character than perfect Cell. Do you agree with that? I don't know if you agree with that, but I'm starting to get that vibe a little bit because you seem to be hyping up everything Imperfect Cell's doing, but then whenever I bring up a trait that Perfect Cell has, it's kind of like, oh well, Imperfect Cell, you know.
Can I?
Yeah, but go ahead.
Can I explain to you? Yeah, I'll explain to you why I think Cell as a whole is great, but I'll go to Perfect Cell just to add to your point here. So the reason why I think Perfect Cell is a great character is because he is also flawed and great at the same time. Why do I bring this up? Because Dragon Ball showed us through Cell's evolution that while Cell became more egotistical and more powerful and was willing to make an old tournament to test himself, we also see that this had its own drawback. In this, it resulted in him creating Gohan to be a lot more stronger because, you know, he wanted to test himself against Gohan and Goku, right? And in addition to this, Cell came back thinking he was the hotshot and eventually gets caught off guard when he could have blown up the whole planet from outer space in the first place. So, because of this, we see from Cell's evolution, two things are happening. Cell is getting stronger. He's becoming more powerful. We see Cell having to go through a very complex process just to absorb those androids. Unlike Buu, who just absorbs people, Cell actually has to do something very complicated. He actually has to absorb intelligent, powerful entities that have a group of characters defending them at the same time.
17, not really, but maybe 18.
Okay. But
with 17, he kind of just snuck up behind him after Piccolo and him beat each other up.
The point is that Cell, whereas Buu could just use his power to suck people up, Cell actually had to go through a very complicated process just to do this, while having a lot more people fighting at him at the same
only
time.
with 18 though. Like, do we agree with it's only 18? Because 17.
I disagree with that because with even you can say that we're
because
stronger.
With 17, here's why. Because with 17, Cell was stronger than 17. Okay, you agree with that.
And why did Cell get stronger than 17?
Well, because he absorbed a bunch of people, right?
And that is already in a very advanced thing, right? So you're already agreeing here that
but let's
Cell
talk about this. So what happens from there is this is after Piccolo and 17 beat the shit out of each other, and then he just sneaks up behind 17, right? You're acting like it's an extremely articulated thing, but it's not really.
Okay, well,
okay,
well, Seth, I want you to hold on, but I got to rebut in here because I want you to.
Can we?
That, okay. Let me just make this point.
Go
let me
ahead.
make this
go
point.
ahead. Yeah.
Because you're comparing this to Buu, who just absorbs people and turns them into candy and eats them. So Cell, who actually absorbs humans to get incrementally stronger piece by piece, versus a guy who can just wipe out the whole planet all at once.
So like,
if that's not a more complex villain, then I don't know what is, bro.
Okay, so before we move on with the absorption point, you kind of ignored the perfect Cell point. I wanted you to go into more detail about the perfect Cell point because it didn't really seem like you proved.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't get to finish that.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I was saying is, and you made a good point, so I'll agree with you on the point you made about Imperfect Cell, how like he was so savage and cunning, and then Cell completely changes. What I love about Cell's character and what I think is great about Cell is that there's a double dynamic that took place throughout his evolution. So when he was weaker than most of the Z fighters, and he had to sneak to absorb people and do all of that shit, we see there that Cell had to use his brains to try and become more powerful. And as he got stronger, his ego expanded, right? But as his ego expanded, it also showed a weakness among Cell. And that's why I'm going to do a whole video in the future talking more about this, because Cell's ultimate design flaw was the fact that he had many of the same personality traits of the people that made him up. So as a result of this, the thing that made Cell so powerful is also the thing that led to Cell's demise, which is one of the things that makes Cell a brilliant character, because he's essentially a metaphor of all the Z fighters that we've had so far. Cell is a metaphor of all these guys who want to become strong and test their own power, but by wanting to test their own power, they eventually fail. Perfect example, in that very same arc, but Cell tricks Vegeta into wanting him to absorb Android 18 so that he could become perfect, because he used Vegeta's ego against himself. But later on, this very same ego would lead to Cell getting himself killed by Super Saiyan 2 Gohan. That is brilliant writing, because it's showing a full circle transition of Cell's character from being cunning to being an idiot because of how his power created his own ego. That's why I think Cell is a more complex villain than any other villain in Dragon Ball history.
Would you agree that the Buu saga copied certain elements from the Cell games? Do I need to...
Specifically what? Like,
so,
what
like,
examples?
a lot of things you brought up, he used his ego against him, blah, blah, blah. Well, Buu did that to Gotenks, right? Buu's flaw was that after absorbing people, he absorbed their flaw, which is what's happened with Cell, right? Cell has all these flaws from all these people the computer gave him, or whatever. There are numerous similarities. It's just that Buu is an evolution of this concept. The reason he's an evolution of this concept is because he represents the evil dichotomy of the characters. You went back into the meta-narrative turf, which that's fine. I don't think the meta-narrative proves that Perfect Cell is better than Imperfect Cell. I still think Imperfect Cell is far more interesting for a Dragon Ball character than Perfect Cell. I guess we'll just have to agree to disagree with that one. But when it came to Buu, he never lost this meta-narrative. So this meta-narrative of Buu as being this ultimate evil force versus this ultimate evil good, right? It evolved the characters to the point where the evil was humbled and the good was humbled, and they both changed, right? So you have the Saiyans learned to work together. They learned numerous techniques. They got over numerous feuds they had. The gods learned to respect mortals. Buu became a good guy and eventually was supposed to help in Super, but got cucked. Whereas Cell never evolved from that character. He literally was just this flawed character like you described. And while that might be consistent, it doesn't describe really that much depth, really. I feel like it's not an evolution of his character. I feel like Perfect Cell was a de-evolution of his character. And while Imperfect Cell was a really great character, I feel like this de-evolution for Cell was not a necessarily good thing. I feel like that what happened with Buu, with him becoming a good character overall, might have actually been better.
Right, but what I'm saying is, well, that was the whole Android Arc's theme as a whole, though. The Android Arc's theme as a whole was talking about how, okay, and let me just bring up one other part. I'm just going to bring up an additional point here, Seth. So when the Android Arc begins, right? When the Android Arc begins, okay, this is before Cell came out, right? The whole point of the arc, right, is that Goku was a Super Saiyan. We figured out that Trunks was a Super Saiyan, and then Vegeta was extra motivated to get this level of fucking power, right? Okay. So then when 18 comes out, and Vegeta becomes like this next Super Saiyan, what happens? 18 whips his ass, teaches him that Super Saiyan isn't shit. So Vegeta's ego gets humbled. Then, when the arc transitions, we see that Vegeta goes into the Room of Spirit and Time, gets this new set of power, fights Cell, whoops his ass, but then he wants to test his power against Perfect Cell, then he gets humbled. Then the same thing fucking happens to Cell. The whole arc was talking about how when you get a new set of power, your ego expands, looking at Super Saiyan 2 Gohan, and then you get humbled and you make mistakes. So Cell, as the ultimate villain of the arc, eventually proved to everyone that Cell was a metaphor of them, which is a very deep level of writing stuff, because it's metaphorically describing all of the flaws of every Dragon Ball character that had ever existed to that point in time.
But Cell didn't really make any mistakes. Even in his perfect state, he never really made a mistake. His only mistake was underestimating Gohan. So I mean, if you think a narrative of underestimating characters rather than completely developing and evolving into a different asset of character using your meta narrative, then I don't know. I guess we just have to agree to disagree. But I don't think that ego flexing is a great narrative trait.
What about the Cell games? And what about sparing Trunks' life?
Well, Trunks never really came back to bite him. I don't think that was a mistake.
Well, metaphorically, if you think about it long term,
plus Buu spared people too, so I don't think that's ever even when he was evil. They kind of just spare people just for their own amusement. It doesn't really seem to be like anything else.
But you got to look at this in terms of how it affected the history of Dragon Ball, because Cell created a tournament. So it's
Cell killed Trunks again anyway. But yeah, keep going.
Yeah, and then Trunks eventually killed Cell.
I'm gonna pee while you go on this point. So yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, so just to go into what you were saying there, Seth, about the de-evolution and Cell's mistakes, the very fact that Cell made a Cell games was eventually a mistake because he was the strongest person on Earth and he could have wiped out the entire planet, which was the logical fucking thing to do. But because of his own ego, he wants to test himself just like Goku and Vegeta do. So by becoming even more powerful like the Saiyans, he became even more like the Saiyans, and that led to his own downfall. So Cell never even needed to make a Cell games. He could have just killed people. He didn't have to go on a TV. That is a fucking ego, bro. Like the dude. That is an ego that if you go on television to tell the planet, come fight me, bitch. That's literally what Cell fucking did. And that eventually led to his own downfall because he never needed to do any of that. So that's why I mean by the whole evolution and de-evolution of Cell, two things were going on at once. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, so you're trying to argue that his de-evolution made him a better character, which I can
Yes.
Yeah, I understand that. But the problem is that it's just not as good as Buu's. It's not as good as Buu's evolution, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So Buu was constantly evolving. Even Super Buu was an evolution from like the Fat Buu for a lot of the part.
Okay.
Except for when he met Mr. Satan. That was obviously a de-evolution, but he was constantly evolving because Buu's character, I don't know if you know the lore about this. I think it's in 12 Buu Mysteries, but basically he was like this. He's supposed to be the immoral, natural like force of whatever that absorbed like
the force of nature. Yeah.
He absorbed the evils of mankind or whatever. And really, the Buu saga was him learning to understand humanity. And this was actually with the fact that he was constantly trying to absorb and become more powerful, that he learned to understand and comprehend humanity and its values, and in the form of Fat Buu later on. And not only this, but this also allowed all the other characters to kind of evolve. Whereas, like, you could say that, say, Goku changed because he wanted Gohan to take the rings or whatever. But then you could also say that Goku evolved like 3 times in the Buu saga, right? He went from mentor to wanting to fuse with the Vegeta because he wanted to take over, to learning how to utilize his own Saiyan potential. He evolved 3 times in the Buu arc. So I would just say that there was way more character evolutions for the betterment of a character than Cell. Now, I'm not saying what's happened to Cell is bad. Like, I think the de-evolution argument that you presented, it makes sense, actually. I think his de-evolution was a good writing point. But I just figure that if we're comparing these two things, that one of these has to be better. And if there's way more development for one of these characters, and there's way more going on for one of them, I just have to side with the one that has more going for it, if that makes sense.
Okay, but see, the thing is, Seth, is that I think you're making good points, right? But where I think my points have more substance to it is when you look at the central characters of the Cell games. And I wanted to counter something you said a lot earlier, because you were talking about how the side characters had way more development in the Buu arc than they did in the Cell games. I could argue that
only
Krillin,
the ones we listed, but
okay, but
you said, I mean, you were like, because you were like, list 5 characters right now, and I was like, I'll have to list 6, but yeah.
I was just making a joke about Legacy of Goku 2 and Buu's Furious video games, but what I was trying to get at is that during the Android arc, the 5 main characters were Piccolo, Goku, Gohan, Trunks, and Vegeta, right? Like, those are like the 5 main characters.
Yep.
And then you even have side characters that had a significant impact on the plot. First of all, Krillin had, and I did a whole what if scenario about this, Krillin was one of the most influential characters in that arc, because had he decided to destroy 18 and deactivate her, the entire arc would have been completely different. We also see that if Tien didn't stall for 18, she would have been absorbed a lot earlier. Now, while she still got absorbed anyways, Tien and Krillin had a significant impact on Dragon Ball history. And then we also see all of the characters fighting against the Cell Juniors at once, something that we don't really get to see in later arcs of Dragon Ball other than the Torment of Power, or I guess Resurrection of F, where like the minor characters actually are involved in a fight. And let's not even bring in Android 16. Look how influential Android 16, being the Android Schwarzenegger, I don't talk and I love birds, Android, made an impact on the plot. He himself brought out Gohan's power. He himself was repaired and became a good guy. He himself actually dictated the events of 17 and 18, because remember, they did what 16 wanted to do. So look at how much of an impact on the plot 16 as a whole had on the entire arc and Cell itself.
Let's just list who you mean by side characters. So you mean
side characters meaning
Krillin,
apart from those.
I know you mean Krillin, Tien, and 16.
And
Are those
those three, and I could list more if you want. You want me to talk about how Bulma made a time machine?
No, I believe you on that.
I mean,
yeah, but
yeah, okay.
you could say Bulma has like her own quirks with every single arc. It's just like varying importance, but she's pretty much
about Dr. Brief.
She's valid in every arc, really. Yeah. But like yeah, I'd say what the Buu arc is mainly doing, it's trying to. I don't even like saying the Buu arc because they're supposed to be just talking about Buu, but I guess we kind of have to. But what the Buu arc is trying to do is it's trying to work off of the ending of the Cell games. So at the end of the Cell games, it was, this is the torch, right? And Gohan's one-handed Kamehameha was like him grabbing the torch pretty much, right?
Yes.
So from there, it was a new generation. Goku shouldn't be here. That's why Goten's here now, right? You have Trunks involved now. You have the Supreme Kai's involved. You just have all of these new extra side characters coming in. Piccolo's relevant still. Goten and Trunks are relevant. Gohan's extremely relevant. Supreme Kai and Elder Kai are extremely relevant. Goku and Vegeta become extremely relevant. So like the side characters, aside from like Piccolo, Goku, Gohan, and all them, the four, like Goten, Trunks, and the Supreme Kai, they're still valid in their own right as well. It's just they're not the old cast that we used to know. Even Tien actually has a similar role in the Buu saga that he does in the Cell saga. It's just not as like exaggerated. Like he actually saves Mystic Gohan's life with his tri-beam from Buu tanks as well, and he actually takes a kick from him. And he was actually going to be a fusion counterpart. And you know what? Actually, going back to side characters, what about Mr. Satan, the most weird, abstract character you could have come into the limelight? This random side champion that got swatted away in the Cell games. Suddenly, he's saving the entire planet. How come?
I could say the whole thing for the Cell arc, though.
How come every single Earthling at the end of the Buu arc was what was being involved as like the people that defeated Buu, right? It just seemed like there was far more people involved with Buu than there were with the Cell arc or whatever at the end.
Okay, well, I'll be honest with you. When you talk specifically about Mr. Satan, I can understand why you can say he had a bigger role in the Buu arc.
He's considered a side character, right?
Right. I would say that he had a way bigger, and also he made friends with Buu. So I could definitely agree with Mr. Satan having a bigger role in the Buu arc. But I mean, let's not discount.
It wasn't just a bigger; it was a massive role.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, let's not. I'm just saying, let's not discount that Mr. Satan was the one that threw 16's head to Gohan, and if he didn't do that, Gohan would probably have turned Super Saiyan 2 way too late, or probably wouldn't have turned it at all.
But did he have to throw it? Was it Mr. Satan that had to throw the hat? I don't know.
Yeah, because it was 16 that had that conversation with Gohan.
I know, but was it Mr. Satan that had to throw 16? Could it have just been someone else?
Who else was around? The other Z fighters were busy.
No, he had those buff guys working with him all around.
Come on,
him.
well, I mean, and they were all.
I'm not saying that Mr. Satan didn't have a role there. I'm just saying it's kind of abysmal to the Titanic role he had in the Buu saga. The one he had in the Buu saga.
I agree with you there. No,
yeah,
you're making my point though. I agree with you that the Buu arc had a bigger role. I'm just saying let's not discount that he at least did something in that challenge, and not to mention everybody else was terrified and relying on him to do it. So he also
this Mayo retard keeps calling me out for my points. Mr. Satan chose to take up the challenge. Yeah, tell me when Mr. Satan chose to fight Kid Buu hand-to-hand combat in the Cell saga. Be quiet, Jesus.
I mean, if you want to go with the anime, he did technically fight Cell first, but
he got slapped by Cell, yeah. But he definitely cowered it away the whole time, whereas he was actually standing up versus Kid Buu, trying to get Fat Buu out of his body. He even befriended Fat Buu to like actually turn him into a good guy. There was nothing like that versus Cell. No, sit down, Mayo.
Either way, though, Seth, what was the point you wanted me to talk about again? Because I kind of
forgot. This retard really pissed me off. I kind of want to debate him.
Yeah, I lost track.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I guess we could just create a new point then, because I lost track of where we were going. Oh shit, it doesn't seem. Yeah, okay. So, yeah, you could debate Mayo after me if you want.
Because we were talking about secondary characters.
Yeah, because he's Jewish, so he could talk all day. But going back to what I was saying in terms of like the main arc as a whole, I think that the main characters and the side characters all had a significant impact on both arcs, right? I'm not disagreeing with you there. Mm-hmm. I do think though, when you talk about the main characters, That's where I truly feel like the Cell arc gets its difference, because I feel like each main character.
So
did
now
something
we're not talking about side characters, because side characters was your main point a while ago. If you want to disregard
well,
side
okay,
characters,
well, what do you consider a main character and a side character? Because I look at the main characters as the main characters that fought against the villain versus the side characters that are like, hey, we're here for you, Goku.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Main characters for me would be like Goku, Vegeta, Gohan, maybe Gotenks.
Right, I would agree with that.
Okay.
Right, so I look at those as the main characters. When I think of side characters, I think of like Krillin, Tien, Bulma. You know what I'm saying?
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
Right. So that's why I was saying I feel like the main characters. But I guess if we were to create like an original point here, I think that the Android arc or Cell arc, or I guess you could say Cell as a character, I think one thing that he also had that a lot of characters didn't have in Dragon Ball until Zamasu came around is the very fact that Cell actually tampered with time travel. Now, think about this for an actual second here, Seth. Now, you could say, okay, well, a linear time doesn't have to be that different. But think about how many elements that arc and Cell introduced in the Dragon Ball that eventually led up to what we now have in Dragon Ball Super. Had it not been for Cell, the groundwork for so many other future arcs wouldn't have been possible.
What do you mean? Like, because he time traveled, like Zamasu happened? Or what are you trying to say?
Right. Because by time traveling, it brought up so many different elements between Trunks' timeline and the future. Because remember, and I'll bring up this point, yes, Trunks was technically the first person we saw time travel in Dragon Ball, but we didn't know shit about Trunks' timeline or who Cell was or any of that shit until Cell came around. When Cell came around, we actually learned more about Trunks' timeline. Something that never really existed before. We just knew that Trunks was this purple-haired kid or blue-haired kid that came from the
No offense, but I find this kind of a non-point. If that's all right, I just find it a non-point because you can make numerous arguments for a previous arc, like helping the future of the series.
Okay, well, let me explain to you why I don't think it's a non-point.
Okay,
because when you were talking about the Buu arc bringing up these interesting concepts to help defeat a villain, this arc brought up an entire new concept to Dragon Ball to defeat a villain in 2 timelines. So I can't see how that's a non-point. Had it not been for time travel, everybody would have been fucked.
So you're saying Cell's good because he introduced Goku Black?
No, I'm not. Cell being good, like as a good guy. No, I'm saying Cell introduced a completely new aspect of looking at Dragon Ball villains from 2 different timelines. That's a completely new way to look at the series.
Okay, so you're saying he had different perspectives, so therefore he's better.
I don't know if perspective is the word.
Okay,
I
would say
that
you use then?
Okay, I guess the best way to put it is just like how you said fusion is a new concept that was introduced to fight against, Buu. Time travel was a new concept that was used to fight against the heroes, and it was also a concept that was used to fight against Cell.
Okay.
You see where I'm getting at with this?
So you're saying because it introduced time travel, it makes Cell a better villain?
Yes, it does. A significantly better villain. Because he killed Trunks to take his time machine. First of all, that requires a certain cerebral level of intelligence. Do you think Super Buu would absorb somebody and go back in time to go?
Can I just tell you that Cell, it was in no way, shape, or form one of the reasons that Zamasu found a time machine?
No, I'm not saying. Okay, I'm not saying that.
So no, he would have happened regardless, because there was like time machines in like Universe 10 somewhere that someone made.
Yeah.
That was in the manga, at least I remember. So no, I don't think
I'm not talking about Zamasu directly.
Okay, I'm just trying to cut off that point there.
Okay, because I'm saying even if you look at non-canon stuff, Seth, I'm saying like when you look at Dragon Ball Heroes, when you look at Xenoverse, I'm saying all of the different types of Dragon Ball Online, all these different types of like Dragon Ball stories that involve time travel, none of this could have existed had it not been for Trunks and Cell. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, so
he created an entire storytelling aspect that added to the Dragon Ball storyline. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, so you could say he's like more polarizing in that case. I want to say that makes him better. I think that's a better plot device, like time travel.
And I'm asking you this: Is Buu I'm saying Blue? Is Buu complex enough of a villain to kill somebody, steal their time machine, and go back to the past just to get stronger? Would Buu do something like that?
If he learned of a time machine, sure.
No, well, first of all, Buu would have to absorb smarter people just to be smart enough to do that.
Which he does.
Cell, okay, well, Cell, okay, well, let me tell you this, Seth. So you're already agreeing that Cell is naturally more intelligent and a more cerebral character than Boo. Boo has to suck people up.
I don't think that.
Okay.
I think Boo is more intelligent than Cell.
Okay, Seth.
Well, let me explain.
Okay.
There's a difference between intelligence and knowledge, right? You're aware of the difference with that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the difference between intelligence and knowledge is what you kind of already know, whereas intelligence is your ability to kind of adapt or be more fluid or learn new things, right?
Okay, well, so Mayo was saying...
Yeah, my argument here... Okay, no one ever said more intelligent, better villain.
No, yeah, I think he's actually talking to me, so let me respond to Mayo here.
Okay, yeah.
I'm not saying that Cell's intelligence makes him a better villain, but what Cell's intelligence does is it makes him a more complex, diversified villain that can impact the plot more.
Plus, Mayo wasn't really here, but we did kind of go because intelligence is one of Cell's most popular points, right? When most people talk about Cell, they're like, "Oh, well, he's really smart compared to the other villains or something." So one of the arguments I was constructing was, well, here's reasons why Boo might be smarter than Cell, right? It was me countering a popular point for his character. So you weren't there for that, and that's mainly why Quinn is talking about that. Okay.
Yeah, and then just to say the thing, like, okay, well, he agrees with you. Well, that's fine. I mean, you can agree with what the hell you want. You know? I'm just saying that that I think that Cell, like the entire conception of Cell's character is way more complex. And I know I'm not saying complex makes you better, but I think it makes Cell more diversified in more storytelling situations. Whereas Boo is more limited. Boo is a force of nature. Boo isn't the type of person that can create Cell Juniors to push Gohan's power. Well, yeah, he can do other things.
Technically, he could like clone himself, but yeah, the Cell Juniors are considered biological doppelgangers.
But think about the mental aspect of Cell versus Boo here. Cell wants Gohan to be stronger so he can satisfy his own ego. So he's using his own powers to push himself.
Well, he did that with Gotenks too, right? He's like, I'll let you be stronger so I can fight you.
Right.
He did that numerous times.
But is that as complex as producing Cell Juniors to push out this kid's power?
Well, he was never put. I don't think he was ever put into a situation where he was, but I don't think that's needed. Because what you're arguing is, okay, he's more versatile with these timelines, but what I'm saying is that the Boo saga was a perfectionist storyline. Whereas the Cell saga needed a very convoluted set of like series to kind of explain itself, right? So it could make sense.
Okay, I mean,
this was the problem with the Goku Black arc. The convolution was a little bit unnecessary at times because it didn't really add anything to the characters. So like when yeah.
Okay.
Obviously it's important for future Trunks because that's where he's fucking from. But it is a little convoluted at times. It's mainly just to explain like how things are happening. If that makes sense.
Do you want me to list 101 reasons? No offense, Geekdom. Do you want me to list 101 reasons why Fat Boo is a terrible fucking character?
Why Fat Boo is a terrible character? Sure.
Because I did a whole video talking about this. I mean, I can go in depth about why Fat Boo is a piece of shit.
Go for it.
So do you want me to go in depth about him? Okay, first of all, the Boo arc...
My main argument, to be fair, is about like kind of more like Super Boo, Kid Boo-ish, but we can talk about Fat Boo if you want. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about fat people now. So, Fat Boo, from the very beginning of the Boo arc, when you really think about him as a character... Look at him. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at what MJ posted. So, where is I? Okay, so Fat Boo. So Fat Boo, from the very beginning, completely shifted the Boo arc into what you were talking about. It made it a much more gag humor, Toriyama back to Dragon Ball story, right?
Yeah,
but
it was
what
fresh,
Fat Boo did is it completely destroyed all of the important characters that were in the Boo arc up until that point. Let me give you an example.
Okay.
It wrote the Supreme Kai off of the story for an extended period of time, right? In addition to this, it got rid of Bobbity, one of the more important characters of the entire arc that actually had a very unique ability. And in addition to this, what it also did was Deborah was probably one of the more interesting characters in Dragon Ball history, and he just gets written off for this fat, rotund, annoying-sounded piece of shit called Fat Boo. So when Fat Boo comes around, he completely shifts the entire story, and then Vegeta blows himself up for no fucking reason. He's so easily manipulated that he can just become a good guy, but then Toriyama has to find a way to make him a bad guy, so he makes like this evil version within Fat Boo to come out to then absorb Fat Boo so he can become like muscular. So now you have a situation where Toriyama is pulling shit out of his ass to make Fat Buu not the villain anymore, to create a new fucking villain. And in creating a new fucking villain, he's just stretching out the pacing and everything. So those are all of my major points. I'll let you counter that. Yeah.
Well, the beginning of the Android arc was pretty shoddy too, right? What happened to Dr. Gero in 19?
I would still 19 was shit, but I would still say Gero was relevant for the whole fucking arc.
Gero was pretty relevant, and so was Babidi, because basically their roles were like summon the Kraken kind of people, right? They're the ones that kind of like brought the calamity per se. So no, I don't think Babidi. If you don't think Gero was bad, I don't think Babidi was bad. I think Babidi, if anything, Babidi was more interesting than Gero by far. Like he had way more going on.
But Babidi was just doing what his father did.
Well, Babidi is Bibbidi. They're like the same person.
Yeah, he's like a clone of him. But like what I'm saying is a doppelganger. But what I'm saying is, but Babidi actually had like this thing where he could like teleport people to different planets. He had like this whole spaceship with different henchmen and all of these agendas that were thrown out of the window for this fat guy who just said, "Hey, you know what? Me Buu no like you now." And that's the thing, because Majin Buu is a child, everybody can simply just manipulate him. Hey, you know what, Buu, you shouldn't be a bad guy anymore. What fucking villain in Dragon Ball history could you do that to?
that's actually the point of it. Yeah, they're talking about what if there was a villain that was stronger than anybody else around, but he was a massive child, so they had to deal with him. Exactly.
That was the problem with that is when you establish this guy as a villain, but now you have to create new villains. Okay, you establish him as the
really a new villain. Because we learned later on that Fat Buu is basically just that Grand Supreme Kai inside of Fat Buu, right? And that's why he was that.
Which is added on writing.
And then obviously Super Buu is just the actual Buu being like, "No, let me out of here. This is retarded."
Yeah, but that was added writing though.
I don't think it was added. Wait, do you have proof it was added writing? Why was it added?
Well, I mean, I don't know. That's
okay.
A question
Let's not make a claim.
Okay, but I mean, I'm saying it was added onto the story afterwards, like, because you know how, like, hey, guess what? Well, I mean, Dragon Ball does shit all the time. I mean, you know what I mean. But the point I'm trying to say is that you know, when Fat Buu, and because even if you go with the anime, they didn't even show the other two. Actually, no, they did. Never mind. Sorry. But going back to the whole thing I was saying about Fat Buu is that. What the problem with MJ's talking about Toriyama is a discovery writer, and because he's a discovery writer, that can also sometimes have its faults. That doesn't necessarily make it a good thing. He discovers some brilliant things to add to the story, but at the same time, he's also forcing the plot to create all of these villains, and in reality, that's hurting the pacing and just throwing the story back in a completely different direction dragging everything out.
You think Super Buu appearing was bad?
What do you mean by that?
I just want clarification. Do you think Super Buu appearing was bad?
I think Super Buu appearing was good, but guess what, Seth?
Okay, so that means that whole thing that you just complained about was good.
Hold on, but I'm not hold on. But what I'm saying though, Seth, is if you're gonna fucking make a villain, then start off Super Buu from the very fucking beginning and then lead up into this because he's the most interesting Buu. Don't make Fat Buu and then now Fat Buu has like this gray version of himself inside of him.
Now you're contradicting yourself, right?
Okay, but I'm not contradicting myself.
Sure you are.
Hold on, let me make my full point. Let me make my full point.
Make your full point. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, so Toriyama is creating Fat Buu. Okay. But then now he's saying, okay, I don't want Fat Buu to be the villain anymore. So now I'm going to create Super Buu by making a skinny version absorb the fat version. But then now later on, he's like, well, I don't want Super Buu to be the villain anymore. So let's make them pull out the fat Buu version in himself to now go back to Kid Buu, which in reality, the whole Buu inside of Buu within Buu thing doesn't make any fucking sense. And I've done a whole video like talking about this shit. It doesn't make any fucking sense. So the mere fact that Toriyama was like, okay, let's make a Buu within a Buu within a Buu shows you his limited writing potential. And yes, he's a discovery writer, but in reality, it just makes the arc more confusing. Whereas the Android arc, although it had plot holes, it wasn't confusing on this level.
Well, okay. I feel like you contradicted yourself because you're really grandstanding this imperfect cell to perfect cell de-evolution, right? But hold on. Let me explain. My entire argument has been that Buu is an evolving concept. Okay, so he starts off as this weird, eerie character. You're like, what the fuck's wrong with him? And then when he starts to lose his luster, right, you're like, okay, the gag's old. He turns into Super Buu, who's a far more menacing, creative character, and he has far more intricacies about him. He then starts absorbing people, taking in their traits, and evolving even further as a character, right? So this is the dichotomy I gave you earlier, is that Buu is an evolving character, whereas Cell was a devolving character. And then Kid Buu is obviously his primordial state, which is obviously about his meta-narrative and about evolving Goku. So that
right, and I think, Seth, that when you compare Cell and Buu directly, I think it's an unfair argument for both of us, and I'm going to argue for your side too, because I have the benefit of talking about a character that was always Cell, and you have the benefit of talking about multiple characters all at once, because Buu is not one person, whereas Cell is. Cell just evolves as one character, whereas Buu actually becomes different people.
Exactly. That's what's interesting about him. That's why I think he's good.
So when we debate Buu versus Cell, we're debating like 5 different Majin Buus versus Cell who actually develops. So that's why I was talking about Cell actually develops within himself, whereas Buu actually becomes different characters.
But he still evolves.
So that's not really development. He's just becoming another fucking person. So for example, Seth, if
I think that's
I'll give you this. I'll give you this, Seth. And this is going to be a very bizarre concept, okay?
Okay.
So if you compare Quinn at 10 years old versus Quinn at 24, I developed physically, mentally, socially, all of that shit, right? Like I developed from a 10-year-old Quinn to a 24-year-old Quinn. But if I fused with geekdom and became, and I don't know, and if I fused with geekdom and now, I'm like brown skinned instead of dark and I'm half Cuban now, I'm a new fucking person. I'm not Quinn anymore. Okay. You see what I'm saying? So if I fused with geekdom,
I understand what you're saying.
I'm
so
not
I'm
the same person.
I'm just gonna butt in here. Fat Buu and Super Buu are the same person. Kid Buu is
not really.
They are the same person.
Okay.
They're literally the same. They're both evil, manipulative. One just has more evil than good, and one has more good than evil. But they're still the same fucking thing. Until later on, they split and they turn into 2 different characters. But at the start, I think we call it Fat Buu and Good Buu, right? So Fat Buu and Super Buu are the same thing, except obviously one's more good than evil. Kid Buu and Super Buu are the same thing, except Kid Buu doesn't have his agency anymore, which is about the meta narrative. And then obviously, and then Good Buu is the Majin Buu was the Fat Buu without Super Buu, right? Without that evil side. So no, he does evolve as a character. Still the same character. I think you're exaggerating the Buuhan part. The Buuhan part is important, but the Buuhan part was more so to show that even at like his peak ego, because Buuhan was way more egotistical than Super Buu. Even at his peak ego, he was still able to humble himself and strategize around things, which is why for me, because Buuhan is Buu as a villain. He's still a villain. Why he was better for me as a villain. And Buuhan is more so like in terms of like in battle. Like I think he's more interesting and better in battle than Cell was. He was more interesting for me. And that was my argument there. But when it comes to his development as a character, I was obviously talking about the main 3 forms, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's funny, Seth, because like as you were talking,
or is it 4 forms? I don't know.
Right. Well, I don't know who I'm literally God is. He says, but wasn't the statement that Cell degenerated back into people who made him versus Buu countering your argument? I don't know what you're talking about.
Wait, hold on, let me read this. But wasn't the statement that Cell degenerated back into the people who made him versus Buu evolving more into people absorbed? Doesn't that counter your own argument?
Oh, no. I see what you're saying now.
No, he never argued Cell devolved from absorbing people. No. I don't think. Yeah.
I'm saying that, okay, I'm literally God. I don't know if you heard the whole debate. What I was saying is that Cell evolved, like he got stronger. He had to absorb those androids to become more powerful. But at the same exact time, what happened is that as Cell got stronger, he devolved mentally into becoming more egotistical. He became more egotistical, which led to his own downfall. Now, let me go back to what you were saying, though, Seth. Now, okay, and you made a good point about Buu becoming different people, which shows a completely different thing, because he was essentially the same character, just expanded. Like, Kid Buu is the more, like, primal version. Fat Buu is the more like childlike version, and then Super Buu and Evil Buu are like the more evil cerebral versions, right? That's a good point you make, Seth. The argument I have against that is that when you look at Cell as a character, and you give Super Buu credit for being, you know, this character that absorbed Gohan and Piccolo and became a lot smarter and did all these things. But at the same time, what I think you're forgetting is that Cell was already smart enough to do a lot of this shit on his own. He didn't have to fucking absorb people to the only thing he ever had to absorb was 17 and 18. Everything else that Cell did, other than the random humans to get stronger, he was smart enough and programmed by Gero to do this all within his own. And I think that that's something that I think separates Cell as a character from Buu.
I think that works against you. I think that works against you because...
Can I make one more point? Let me just make one more point, Seth.
Yeah, let me write that down. I don't know.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Just let me just make one more point, Seth, because like I used the example of the very fact that Cell was smart enough, because you got to really think about this, that the very fact that Cell identified a character, knew that he had a time machine, and went back in time to absorb androids to test his own power, that by itself is a brilliant creation of a Dragon Ball villain that has never existed before. That's my opinion, bro.
Okay, can you
if you compare that to just a force of nature that just wants to kill people, then fine.
Repeat that second point for me again, because I was writing.
The very fact that Cell was smart enough to identify a character and kill him to go back in time to test his power and absorb androids is a brilliant creation of a character. You want to know why? Because Cell didn't need to go back in time to become perfect. What's the point of becoming perfect? What's the point of getting stronger? He did it strictly because of his own ego and to become more powerful, which by itself is a brilliant design of a character as compared to a guy who's just a force of nature or a child that just wants to kill people for the fuck of it. Cell has legitimate reasons to want to kill people. He just doesn't want to blow shit up. He wants to prove that he can blow shit up against different people. And that by itself makes him a way more complex and better villain than Majin Buu could ever be.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to the point that I wrote down. So this point is directly contradictory to the points you were making earlier.
Hold on. So, Seth, for one quick second, do you mind if we bring Mayo in here? Because
he's talking a lot of shit. Yeah, I already wrote down the points, so we can
Mayo,
bring
I want you to jump in here because, like, it seems like you're having arguments.
Fucking nerds.
Quinn, you forgot how the Cell arc went, bro.
How the fuck did I forget how the Cell arc went?
Hey, we can't have two whites against one black, though.
Bro, Cell had to come back.
What are you talking? Wait, what? Well, hold on, Neo, I didn't hear you. What?
You said Cell didn't have to come back to become perfect. He did have to come back to become perfect. That's the whole reason he's a villain in the first place.
No, that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying, Mayo. What I'm saying is that the whole concept of Cell being perfect because Trunks destroyed the androids is a brilliant concept within himself because Cell already is super fucking powerful. Why the fuck does he need to get stronger? For what? When there's no one left to fight. He didn't have to do that, but his mentality and his ego was strong enough to go back in time. That's the point I'm trying to say. He is that complex of a villain that he's willing to go back in time just to get stronger. That takes dedication, bro. Majin Buu would never do something like that. That's all I'm saying, Mayo.
Can we write down that?
You should phrase it a little better then.
Well, I thought I did. I mean, I'm not Jewish, sorry.
Okay, so I wrote down these 2 points because, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think, Mayo, did you want to counter what Seth was saying? Because I brought you in so you could talk with him too, because I know that you were diddling, you were bopping your head.
I don't know what I have to counter. The thing that we got into a small debate over earlier was about Satan's character arc. I was just saying it was established in the Cell arc. That's all I was saying.
Basically, it began in the Cell arc, right? But
that's what I was saying.
Yeah.
Is that it's set up that he can take up a challenge if need be. That he will throw away his cowardice if the situation calls for it. That's all I was saying.
Okay. Right, but like I said before, I still think the Buu saga, he did way more than he did in the Cell saga. That's all I was saying.
No, of course.
Because basically,
I agree with you
because basically the argument. Yeah, okay. If we agree, then that's fine. Okay, cool.
No, I'm not agreeing. I just said he did something in the Cell arc, but no, I would be a fucking moron to debate Mr. Satan doing more in the Cell arc.
Yeah, okay. If we're all on the same page, because the only point was like side characters and their uses. Okay, so
I can't do that.
So going back to your point, I felt like this contradicted one of your earlier arguments. So one of your earlier arguments about why Cell was so interesting is because Buu appeared, and Buu is like this alpha dog that was raping everything in sight, destroying these characters, blah, blah, blah. And Cell seemed like this underdog. What villain is an underdog? What villain seems weaker than the main cast, other than pretty much everyone in like the beginning of Dragon Ball? But we'll ignore them. But like Cell seemed like this underdog. He'd do all this smart shit to get around the strong fighters. But this contradicts your point, because the whole reason Buu absorbs people is because he needs to learn more. He is an intellectual underdog. Okay, like a lot of the time, he doesn't know some things and he doesn't have all the power all the time. There's a lot of times where people come in and they just start cogging on him. And this requires him to adapt, especially in the Fusion arc. In the Fusion saga, that's where Buu really had to go full circle and start absorbing to learn things and learn how to adapt to these fighters. Whereas when Cell absorbed people, it was more like because he was indoctrinated since his incubation to become perfect. It was almost never really, I need to become stronger. If it was just that, obviously just absorbing a bunch of people and becoming a lot stronger would have been good enough for him, but it was the idea of perfection that he's been taught his entire creation from the computer that really spurred him onwards, and he was designed by Dr. Gero to desire this perfection, which is why he was so autistic about his hunt to become perfect, and that's why he seemed to kind of settle down, right? He wasn't running around trying to get more powerful, he wasn't running around trying to get new techniques or strengths. He was just like, all right, now the time to flex my perfect form on these guys, right? Because this is what I was taught would make me invincible. This would smash Goku and gang if I got this. So no, I think that the whole argument you made of Cell was just such a Chad. He wanted to get power. That's true, but it was a little bit more subtle than that. It was more just because of his programming. And obviously, Buu's absorption to me was more interesting than Cell's absorption, simply because of the way it developed Buu into a fighter when he absorbed people. So I think that was actually, I think that was negative against you on the absorption point.
Okay, well, I'll make 2 points to counter your counter to my counter.
Okay.
Let's start off with the first part. All right, so the first point you were making is about you were looking at like how Cell was initially like weaker, right? Now the thing about
that's what you
Cell
said. That's what you said.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Sorry. So the point I was bringing out, and I find it interesting, Seth, because you brought up the conversation about how Buu needs to absorb people because he's mentally inferior. You're kind of making my argument, but just in a different form, because Cell, the only difference between Cell and Buu, obviously not intellectual, is that Cell starts off smarter than Buu and needs to get more powerful, whereas Buu starts off more powerful, but he starts off dumb. So one is powerful and dumb, and one is smart but weak. And they both need to develop in different ways.
I am going to backtrack the position that he was intellectually like challenged, because even when he absorbed Piccolo, he's like, I think I'll just absorb Piccolo to kind of learn what he knows, right? I'm just gonna get a little IQ boost. So I don't think it was ever like a main point that he absorbed people for IQ. It was definitely mainly a power up thing, but he did absorb people to learn what they did know, and I think that's what I was trying to exaggerate more.
It's so funny, like people are talking in the chat that like we're like, this is how a debate should be, and I agree, Seth. This is a good debate because like we're not like being assholes or being completely respectful and making each other's points here. So
right, this is what I call semi-formal, which is what
because like, you don't have to like say somebody's a fat piece of shit, you know, to debate somebody. But going back,
y'all are both nerds.
Thank you, thanks, Big Jiggly. But anyways, going back to what
That's not my nickname, bro.
I'm sorry, Fat Boo. But going back to what I was saying though, Seth. Yeah, but going I love you too, baby. But going back to what I was saying about Cell though. I'm trying to remember the other point you made, Seth. Hold on. You were making a point about we were talking about intellectual and then him getting stronger. What was the other thing you countered? I'm trying to remember the other point you made.
So I fucking deleted my notes. Okay, so I talked about absorption.
The absorption, that was it. Okay.
Well, the whole thing was about absorption, and then the next point was Cell being programmed.
Okay. So I wanted to talk. Okay, I'll talk about the absorption. And I'll talk about the program. Okay. So the thing about Cell's absorption, why I think it makes it way more interesting than Buu, is because first of all, Cell's degree of difficulty for absorbing a character is significantly more advanced than Buu, right? Because Cell has to like beat your ass, and then hold you down and then suck you up, whereas Boo can just like get you off guard and take you, or then turn you into chocolate and take you. That's way fucking easier than like somebody having to do this while also having to deal with Vegeta and Trunks.
I was
and
mainly
18
talking about the results, by the way, not
right. But
Okay.
I'm saying, but I'm just saying the process. The reason why I think Cell's evolution is amazing is because Cell had to go through a lot of shit to get his fucking power. How like okay, and here's another character I'll compare it to Cell, and I know he's not a part of the debate, Seth, but I think Frieza is a great example, and I've talked to Big Nigga about this. So I talked to Big Nigga once about comparing Frieza to Cell, and why I love Cell's transformation over Frieza's is because Frieza just has forms because he has forms. Frieza has the second, third, fourth, fifth golden form just because he fucking does. Whereas Cell had to earn his fucking forms by absorbing these androids. You know what I'm saying? And then Boo's forms, I'll be honest with you, I think it's unique in this. I think Boo's forms might be more unique in terms of how he gains
they're
their
more
powers
than just
and, like,
transformations, which I really appreciate.
right, because it kind of morphs into him. I do think Boo's forms are unique, don't get me wrong. However, I do think the whole metamorphosis of Cell transforming is way more interesting as opposed to Boo, because he has to go through so much and he has to absorb two specific things to get perfect.
So here's something that happened with Super Boo. I think how do I put this? I think you are underestimating how difficult it was for Boo to kind of absorb Gotenks. So the first thing Boo needed to do is take an ass beating from Gotenks for like an hour. Okay? He wasn't allowed to kill Gotenks. He might have been able to, because they were equal or whatever, and Boo is obviously way more hacks than Gotenks. So he sat there and took an ass beating from Gotenks for an hour. You even thought Gotenks might have killed him at the end of it. Then he has to take an ass beating from Gohan to test out his theory. Then he kamikazes and self-destructs himself to think about his plan in more detail and to kind of like restructure the fight, like recenter where they are and position them better. Then he's able to slip his like goo behind all of these rocks and suppress its energy to where all of the most powerful fighters in the universe at the time can't even detect what he's doing. So no, I feel like the plan and the stakes for Boo was definitely looking at two very hungry tigers and he was stuck in a cage. So no, I think Boo was definitely he was definitely pitched to do that. With Gohan might have been a little bit different. I think Gohan's was a little bit more of like a write-off. But it was still kind of a similar thing. He definitely caught him by surprise. And it definitely was very similar to like Cell kind of catching, say, I wouldn't say it's much different than 17 getting absorbed, to be honest. 17 was just kind of like caught off guard, and Boo waited for the right moment to get him or whatever. And Boo was also calling on the ego of Gotenks to...
Give me 1 second. I'm getting a phone call. Hold on. Give me a second. All right, I'm back. All right.
Expected.
So, continue what you were saying?
Yeah. So, Gotenks then gets, like, called out to come fight the fighters or whatever, come fight Boo. So, no, I think that Boo was way more clever in his dealing with Gotenks than Cell was with 17.
Well, here's where I respectfully disagree and where I personally think the argument gets checkmated in terms of Cell, and I want Mayo to comment on this one. The reason why I think that Cell had a significantly higher degree of difficulty to... Mayo, we've talked about this before. This is why I wanted you to chime in after I make my point. The reason why I think that Cell had a significantly greater degree of difficulty in absorbing the androids as opposed to Majin Buu is, first of all, when Buu absorbed those people, he did it when they were off guard, right? When Cell absorbed people, he had to absorb them while they were on guard. He had to absorb them while they were self-aware that he was there, and they were self-aware that he was going to absorb them. So I'll give you an analogy, Seth. If I'm coming to your house and you know I'm going to rob you, is it a lot harder to prepare for me then? Or you rob my house when I'm asleep? And I think the analogy is that Cell had to do this also while having a fucking team of people trying to stop him while he was trying to do it.
Your point falls short, definitely, because for one, Gotenks was equal to Boo, right? Whereas 17
I'm saying when he absorbed him.
17 was damaged and way weaker than Cell. So no,
But
it's like catching off guard an opponent who's like your equal or superior compared to someone who's far inferior to you, because Cell could have killed 17 in one shot.
But Seth, I'm calling you Cell instead of Seth. Seth, that's not the argument that I'm making, though. The argument that I'm making is that Cell had to go through a team of people, regardless of how strong he was. He had to go through a team of people just to even try and absorb them.
Well, he had to go through a team of people to absorb Gohan too. And
not really. They were off guard when he put the chewing gum.
Well, Gohan already knew about absorption.
It doesn't matter. He did it when they were off guard.
Well, how is that any harder than what he did to 17?
Because Cell had to go through so many different
all of the people there, all of the people defending 17 were weaker than Cell, except for 16.
Not really. 16 wasn't weaker, and not to mention Piccolo and 17. Okay, yeah, they were weaker than Cell, but they're still okay. The point I'm trying to say is that even if they were weaker, they were still a force to be reckoned with.
No, Piccolo and 17 were not a force to be reckoned with.
Tien is a weak piece of shit, and he held off semi-perfect Cell to let 18 escape.
Hold on, you got to stay on one point at a time, because I'm talking. I'm talking about 17 getting absorbed. All right, if you want to talk about 18, let's separate it.
I'm talking about all of them. Okay. I'm talking about.
You're talking about like some weird composite absorption.
Okay,
but we need to
It
stay
doesn't
on
matter
track.
because, the reason I'm saying, Seth, is that my argument works for any fucking character. It doesn't matter, because if you argue for 17 or if you argue for 18, I can find instances of shit Cell had to go through to absorb them.
Let's talk about 17.
Okay, so let's start with 17. Okay. So when we start with 17,
all right, I'm gonna finish my point. You're getting a little heated.
Okay.
Right, let me finish my point. Okay. My point was that no, Piccolo and 17 were fodder compared to Cell. Like, Cell actually one-shotted Piccolo. Literally. He one-shotted Piccolo. No, they were not a force to be reckoned with. The only thing that happened is that Cell caught 16 by surprise and like knocked him into the ground, then snuck up on 17, and then 17's fodder ass couldn't fight back. You might be able to argue that like, oh, okay, so Cell needed to go around absorbing humans or whatever to get to this point, but Boo's arc wasn't like determined on him becoming perfect, like his programming. You still haven't talked about that programming point, because Boo's whole purpose was to like find himself as a character and find what he was doing, right? Because he was just a force of nature, and he was constantly learning new things about humanity that weren't so dark, blah blah blah.
Right.
So his whole plot point wasn't like Cell's. So no, I think for what it was worth, the absorption that Boo did was just fine. And I think what I was referring to mainly was post-absorption, it was a far more interesting change, because Boo would absorb the qualities of that character. He would absorb their personalities, their knowledge, and etc. that he would use against other fighters, like where he was mind-fucking Gohan with Piccolo's teachings. It was a far more interesting development than Cell becomes chatty and can use weird cyborg like telepathy on 18 or something. That's what I was mainly saying.
that was actually pretty funny, I'll be honest. But all right, so if I were to counter that, I guess the first direction I would go in is I would go with what you were saying about 17. So let's both argue both absorptions, right? So for Cell's first absorption, he had to absorb a whole bunch of fucking people just to be strong enough to even fight 17, Piccolo, and 18, right? And 16. So he had to absorb a massive amount of people, something that Boo doesn't have to do, just to be able to fight 4 characters. Then when he absorbs this massive amount of fucking people, not to mention, Seth, he also has to do this. He also has to absorb these fucking people while Piccolo and nobody else even knows where he is. So he has to do it secretly. He can't just do this out in the open, because if he attracts a lot of attention, they're going to hunt his ass down and kill him. So he has to do this covertly. Then after he successfully does this covertly, he then finds Piccolo and 17. The only reason he found them was because Piccolo was fighting him. When Cell was smart enough to identify when he was strong enough to take them out. So first of all, we're already getting a point of intelligence here where Cell is mentally smart enough to identify how strong he should be to fight Piccolo and 17. And then after this, he has to go through 17, Piccolo, 16, and 18, all to absorb 17, right? So that was number 1, and 16 was equally as strong as he was. Next, after this, in the second absorption, he has to go through Tien. He has to go through Goku saving his friends. He has to go through He has to also fucking go through Trunks and Vegeta and outsmart Vegeta and turn. He made Vegeta fucking turn himself over. I'm sorry. He fucking turned Vegeta against his own son by using his ego against him. If that's not a smart fucking villain, I don't know what else is, bro. He turned Vegeta against his own fucking son so he could absorb 18. Then he uses solar flare, a technique he gained to take everybody off guard, and then fucking take Android 18 so that he could fight against Vegeta. And then he also outsmarted Vegeta by convincing him that he should even allow him to go into his perfect form anyways. Look at all the different ways that Cell fucking outsmarted every single character in Dragon Ball, or outpowered those characters covertly and tricking them into even allowing him to absorb himself. So that's ultimately why I think Cell is a way more complex and better villain than Majin Buu's dumbass is.
Okay, so this definitely isn't their overall character. This is, I don't know why you said he's a more complex character, because this is just absorption. But anyway, talking about absorption,
that's part of it, though.
It's part of it, but it's definitely not a complete factor. But I was just commenting on that last point. I don't know if that was an argument for you.
Well, hold on one second, Seth. Mayo Mayo, you want to comment on that? Because I only wanted to bring you up, Mayo, because I wanted to talk about the shit we said before.
Okay.
I mean, Seth basically said what I was gonna say. Cell fucking he was stronger than everyone there. Piccolo completely underestimated him when Cell showed up.
Okay, what about
don't worry,
18?
guys, I got this, and then he got fucking bodied.
What about 18?
Cell catching people while they're on, or Cell going against people on their guard doesn't really matter, because most of the time when he absorbs people, he's stronger than them. Tien got lucky with stopping Cell, and that's very apparent. And even then, he can't last that long. He knows it's a Hail Mary of an attack. That's the only reason it's working, is because it's a Hail Mary. He's literally killing himself to stop Cell.
Yeah.
Right.
Also, I find it kind of...
Okay. Well, hold on 1 second, Seth. But Mayo, what about my completely different argument? I mean, you got to also talk about what I said about 18.
I'm sorry, what did you say about 18? I've been up for 10 minutes.
No, I was saying about 18 that we can't just ignore that Cell also deceived Vegeta and tricked him into fighting his own son.
But that's not like a smart move. It's if you look at Vegeta,
that's not smart to make a father fight his own fucking son to absorb 18. That's not smart.
Yeah, but every villain finds a way to use Vegeta against the other characters.
So if I tricked Danny into letting me onto his YouTube channel so I could steal all of his income, that's not smart.
No, bro. Vegeta is a character that every villain uses against the heroes. That happens in every arc he's in.
But still. Okay.
Remember when Frieza tried to turn Vegeta against Goku in Revival of F even? I thought it was a meme.
Yeah, it's a plot device that's constantly used. Vegeta is always the reason. Yeah, exactly. Babidi did it too. He realized that Vegeta was the easiest to get to, so he got to him and fucking whispered in his ear, and then Vegeta used Babidi. That's the only difference.
Okay.
Seth made a good point with Buu catching them off guard. Buu made them go off guard. Buu easily could have gotten them at any point, but Buu chose to wait till they were down on their guard, and for the most part, that's the own character's fault.
Right, but what the point I'm trying to get is that you're saying that Buu got them when they were down, Mayo. And Seth, let me just say this to Mayo before
he didn't get them when they were down, though. He got them when they thought they won.
Right, but what I'm trying to say is I don't think that is as difficult as going through an army of people trying to protect the androids.
And honestly, there wasn't really anyone to protect the androids, bro. Everyone there was a fucking jobber.
Cell was weaker than Vegeta and Trunks. Cell was weaker than 7. Cell was weaker than 18, 16. He was weaker than all 4 of the androids. He had to absorb people just to be able to... Mayo, he had to absorb people just to be strong enough to fight them. And then on top of that...
But that's how he's made.
But
Cell
but
wasn't made to be strong without the androids. He has to do other stuff to power himself up. He's not a naturally strong character.
That's not my argument, Mayo. My argument is who had a harder time going through shit and complexity. He had to fucking go through getting somebody while they think they've won is not as difficult as having to absorb people just to compete. And then you have to go through an army of people just to absorb them. That's not as difficult. I don't know how you guys define complex.
I don't think
if we're talking about complex, then how is running through people instead of like strategizing to absorb? How is strategizing to absorb and catching them off guard when they think they won on purpose less like complex than just running through them like a football player?
Yeah, and Seth when Seth brought up the just now with the catching them off guard or just running through them point, like Cell didn't have to run through them. He could have found a way to sneak up on them. Like he's a sneaky character. Like it's been shown. He's literally a bug. He can just fucking like disappear essentially. He did it.
Right.
But like for some reason he doesn't do that. He could have showed up, hit them all with the solar flare and just absorbed 17, but he doesn't.
Okay.
Like he chooses to fight through everyone.
Right.
That's not a more complex thing. That's just a dumb decision.
But
Boo made the smarter choice in taking advantage of them going off guard.
Right, but Mayo, you completely just erased my first point about how Cell had to absorb a massive amount of people covertly just to be able to fight them.
No, I did mention that though. Cell isn't a naturally strong character. He has to absorb other people to do stuff because his power-ups are the androids. Without the androids, he's fucking nothing.
Right, and that was the point that I was trying to make.
And I countered that by saying he's not a naturally strong character.
So that you're not countering my point. You're just stating the obvious. You're agreeing with me that Cell has to go through more shit than Boo does. I don't.
You're arguing.
That's the argument. Okay, Mail. Sorry, Seth.
Okay, maybe I'm just misunderstanding what you said.
Okay, Mail. Let me rephrase.
You're arguing apples to oranges because they're forms of like powering up are completely different.
Okay, but the point I'm trying to make is Seth was arguing that it was Boo had to outsmart them by getting them off guard when they thought they'd won the fight. My argument is that for Cell to even get powerful in the first place, he had to go through more fucking shit. That's the argument that I'm trying to make. So when you compare Cell versus Boo, Cell had to absorb people, then go through powerful characters, then trick a stronger character just to get to his perfect form, as opposed to, hey guys, here's some pink chewing gum, become a part of me now.
But wait, Boo literally had to go through a mental break to get to Kid Boo. If you're talking about them getting to the more powerful forms, like Super Boo literally had to have a part of himself torn out to become Kid Boo to get to his final form.
That has nothing to do with this argument, though.
But you're saying to power up and get to their forms that one had to go through more shit than the other. But you could argue that Boo had to go through more shit. Just because one was more difficult doesn't mean it was more taxing on the character.
But that's the point. But Mayo, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about who's more complex. The argument Seth and I are having is who went through more shit to become who went through more shit to get to their best forms. By Super Boo becoming Kid Boo, that's just a freak accident. Nobody even knew that was gonna happen until Super Boo was like, "Don't pull him out."
To do it. Just because they didn't know it doesn't mean anything.
But that's a bunch of random.
You're arguing. No, you're trying to argue complexity of a character by using complexity of storytelling.
No, Mayo, because what you're talking about is the fact that Boo went through a bunch of freak incidents to get to Kid Boo. I'm not talking about the other one. I'm just talking about Kid Boo. He had to go through a freak incident to go back to Kid Boo. Cell had to go through a specific fucking process of a bunch of people trying to stop him to become Perfect Cell. I don't know how the fuck that's not more complicated than what Boo went through.
But so your argument isn't that the character so you're arguing that the storytelling is complex, not that the character's complex.
Right. Cell went through a way more complex evolutionary process than
I don't think
that's
Cell having to fight people is complex. I think it's just Dragon Ball.
Okay. I'm saying that Cell had to go through a complex evolutionary process and also had resistance to get to his perfect form. Whereas Buu,
you mean like every villain in Dragon Ball?
Whereas with Buu, not really, because not all villains have resistance when they're transforming. Sometimes they just transform. Cell wasn't complete
a lot of them that had other forms had resistance.
Like who?
Frieza being a main one, they constantly tried to stop him, but they kept getting bodied and couldn't do anything.
Right, but Frieza's forms are just Frieza's forms. He can do it just because he can do it. Cell has to actually absorb people to get that form.
You could argue that they could have stopped him like they could have stopped Cell, but they couldn't because he was too strong, which Cell was. Cell was too strong for them to stop for the most part.
At what point, though?
He fucking bodies Piccolo and puts up a fight against 16.
And he gets his ass whipped. He gets his ass whipped by 16.
I'm going to make my point, okay? Because I don't have all night.
I understand that.
So I'm gonna make my last. Hold on, Mayo. I'm going to make my last counter to the point that I wrote down, and then after that, MJ will judge, or we can do conclusions after that. Up to you. And then after that,
if you ever want, we could do this on YouTube, bro.
And then after that, you can debate Mayo.
I'm just talking about this.
I have it recorded. If you ever wanted it to be uploaded to my second channel or something, I don't upload debates to my main channel unless it's like.
I got you.
Yeah, whatever.
I was just saying that real quick that Mayo like Mayo and I are just arguing about this thing because according to what Mayo says,
just let me make my point and then we'll conclude and then you'll argue.
It's been like 20 minutes. I don't know why you even dragged me into this.
No, I'm just saying because you said you agreed with my points about the whole arc as opposed to the Buu arc. You just disagree about this point. That's why I brought you in.
I'll mention about your argument when you're done because I think you've been making the wrong argument the entire time.
Yeah, Quinn, since Danny isn't here, I'll go ahead and just jump in. You and Seth finish. Y'all want to do conclusions or not? I'll judge.
I'll make
then
my
you
last
and Mayo
point,
can talk.
Then we'll conclude.
All right, everybody else. Okay. So go back. Finish your point, Seth.
So after this, then we conclude. Then MJ will do his final critique or whatever. Okay, so you said that his absorption was more impressive because he had to fight people like 17, 18, Piccolo, and 16.
Right, and then absorb humans, yes.
Right, and then he had to absorb people. Then we just have to talk about the plot, right? Because Cell's plot was entirely constructed around him becoming perfect, whereas Buu's was more discovering the humanity or the goodness of humanity. And despite the fact that his plot wasn't centered around absorption, he still had a rivaling interest in terms of how he accomplished his absorption. Because obviously Cell footballing through 17, 18, Piccolo, and 16 was kind of out of character for first form Cell. I think it was actually out of character, and I think that was actually a bad merit on Cell's part. And you also argue, he has to go around fighting all these humans, finding them secretly while, big bad people are looking for him or whatever. Well, they're not really bad, but people are looking for him. But you deny Buu doing the same thing in front of Gotenks and Gohan, who are like these titans that would just one-shot him at this point. Well, at least Gohan would. And so Buu is doing all of these intricate things in front of these people. He's not running in the shadows. He's having to articulate these strategies on the fly while under pressure. And I think that's more interesting. Also, you mentioned the point, Cell has to identify how strong Piccolo is. Well, Buu identifies how strong he has to beat Gohan from another dimension and takes an hour-long ass beating and then suicides and a strategy to make Gotenks and Gohan feel like they're winning so he can catch them by surprise. So no, Buu does a similar thing. Super Buu uses Gotenks' ego, which is a new point, and obviously everyone kind of got on you about Vegeta's plot device of him being turned on people or helping the enemy transform. And I feel like you're ignoring the intelligence and character change, because my main point with absorption is that after all of this, after this big ordeal to get the absorption done, right? Everything happens, me and you are arguing about the process of absorption. But my main point was that the absorption in totality after it happens is far more interesting in Buu to see how he evolves.
Right.
So that's my final point. So you can conclude now, and then I will conclude what I think happened, and then MJ will judge.
Okay, well, let me just counter that last point and say one more thing here. First of all, just to...
okay. Well, is that okay with you, Seth?
we just agreed to concluding, but all right.
Let me just make my final point because I can't just like let him say anything without giving a chance to talk back. My final point that I wanted to make about
actually no, you can't go next because you started the debate. That would give you an extra turn over me. So no, we need.
Well, he is right about that. The debate did start with you.
You started, so you cannot conclude. So you have to conclude now. You can't make a final.
Sum up your final point.
That's what I was saying. I was just going to conclude by responding to what you said.
If your conclusion is a response, then sure, it's a faulty conclusion, but go for it.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I was just going to.
Okay, go ahead and conclude then.
Okay. So, I'm trying to just remember your point again, Seth. So you were talking about, all right. So what Super Buu had to go through, all the pressure and stuff, right? Okay. First of all, Cell had to go through something very complex. I'm sorry. Cell. There's an innate advantage that Buu had that Cell didn't have throughout this entire fucking arc. That advantage is that Piccolo, because of great character development and Piccolo actually being used very well in the Android arc, figured out what Cell's entire agenda was in the fucking first place. Majin Buu has this absorption ability that nobody else knew about. So when Cell came to absorb the androids, they knew why the fuck he was there. Majin Buu, they didn't even know he could do that. So by default, the characters were caught off guard because they didn't know fucking Buu could do that. If they had known that, then they wouldn't have been caught off guard. And then you could counter that by saying, oh, well, then Cell's a dumbass for fucking telling Piccolo that, oh, well, why would Cell tell Piccolo all these fucking things about himself from the future? Well, then that goes into character development. Because the point I made about Cell as a character is the fact that, yes, Cell is very smart and very cunning, but Cell also has an ego, which makes him a better all-around villain because he has his flaws while he also has his strengths. And that's the last point I wanted to make, so before Mario Jimmy whips out his dick.
Okay, I'm just writing my conclusion a little bit, just going point by point.
Did I really start the debate, by the way?
You did, yeah. I asked you, so what's your argument? So you started.
I'll take your word on it.
Okay, I guess I won't just sit here and write a conclusion. I'll just go off the top of my head. So
just talk, bro. We're bopping our heads.
I feel like Quinn has conceded numerous arguments throughout the debate, with absorption being his last standing axiom before a real final yield, in my opinion. We've had numerous arguments throughout all of this, and you'll notice that like I would constantly defend the Buu saga because I feel like the Buu saga, and most people will agree with this when they come in, they're like, what, the Buu saga is shit. So when they see my defenses of the Buu saga, they're like, I don't know if I've ever heard of that before, so they kind of move away from the point. And I feel like that's what was happening here. I felt like Quinn would make an argument, say like, oh, what about the support cast or something like that, and then I made a really powerful case for the support cast in the Buu saga. I made a really good case for like Mr. Satan, Gotenks. I had to talk about like gags. I had to talk about why gags in the Buu saga were good, and then I had to talk about in real good detail the evolution of Buu being much better than the de-evolution of Cell when it came to overall impact on the characters in the cast, and explain the character development between these characters and why it was good or bad. And then at that point, like I said, it felt like Quinn really yielded back to this absorption argument. He was really hammering the absorption argument, but it also felt like he was doing it in a really faulty way, right? Like, because my main argument was that when Buu absorbed people, it was just more interesting, but I didn't mean it in the methodology, because I clearly described numerous times that the methodology behind him absorbing people was never really like the plot of the show. It was mainly just Buu trying to survive and understand himself and humanity around him, which I said numerous times. So I felt like I definitely won this debate, but props to Quinn. I think he's a lot better than I ever actually gave him credit for, and I was definitely surprised. So thank you.
I can't respond to that, right?
No.
Okay.
That's what a conclusion is supposed to be. A conclusion is supposed to be your sum up of the debate. That's why a conclusion is so important.
Because the last thing I said wasn't really a conclusion. I just was arguing your last.
Yeah, that's why it's called a faulty conclusion.
Yeah, but that's why I was like, either you argue.
I didn't know you meant it in that way.
That's what I said, man.
I misunderstood, but
no.
Either way, if I were to just say this real quick, because I'm not gonna. Oh my
god, he gets a conclusion and an extra argument, dude.
No, because I didn't understand what you meant by that. But yes, but let me just say this.
No, I made it very clear. No, I'm putting my foot down. No, stop. MJ.
Well, yeah, the debate. No, yeah, Quinn, the debate's over.
Gotta stop, bro.
So
That's not fair then.
Yes, it is. I gave you the opportunity to conclude, and
But
you said,
I didn't understand. But I didn't know that's what you meant by.
we literally yelled at you that you started the debate, so you can't just take an extra turn.
No,
So
that's
right
not
now,
what I'm
you know what?
saying,
It
Seth. I
sounds
didn't
like
understand
you're trying to manipulate everyone into getting as
No,
much
I'm
of a
not.
word
No,
in
no,
as
Seth,
possible.
Seth. I misunderstood what you meant by.
This sounds
conclusion.
extremely sophist. This is extremely
No.
this
Seth,
disrespectful.
let me
Hold on. Let me jump in.
Let me just make my point. I'm not.
Quinn. Let me say this real quick. We did try to tell you this. Both Mayo, Seth, and I were trying to tell you what the conclusion was.
I misunderstood what you meant. I was just arguing his
No,
last
bro,
point. I didn't know I was supposed to conclude my argument.
going with it.
It's over.
I was just talking. Okay, but I'm just saying I fucking understood, dude.
Okay.
Yeah, but
So now I'm gonna get points taken off because I misunderstood. That's fucking fair.
We all told you what happened. So not only did you take an extra turn, but now you're demanding a conclusion on top of your extra turn. That's not fair.
I know, Seth, I agree with you. No, Seth, I agree with you that it's not fair that I would get 2 chances to talk. I'm just saying I misunderstood what you meant by that. That's all I'm saying.
But Quinn, we explained to you that you wouldn't be allowed to argue in your conclusion. You would just have to make a conclusion, finalizing your points and saying "fuck," you respect your opponent or whatever the fuck else you want to add on.
Whatever, dude.
But like,
whatever, dude.
We explained that in detail, but you were like, "I'm gonna argue anyway."
See, the thing is, I don't want to come across as a sore loser. That's why I'm not. That's why I'm gonna just say, fine, whatever. If it's over, it's over. I'm just saying I misunderstood.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. I misunderstood, but I'm not going to be a sore loser. I accept it. I think I debated the best I could. I think I won the debate, and that's my opinion. Seth made good points. I think I made good points. That's it.
Okay.
All right, I'll go ahead and
letting you know I misunderstood the fucking conclusion.
Okay, I'll go ahead and judge then. So, all right, the debate was fine, a lot better than other debates that Seth's been in, especially about Naruto stuff that I've been, I guess, there to listen to. But overall, the debate kind of fell short at the end. I don't know why Quinn brought in Mayo. Yeah, Mayo was talking in the chat, but so were a lot of the people. I didn't still feel the need for you to bring him in just to talk about him and his points. I think that threw the debate off. Also, on top of that, Quinn, I do feel like you were standing the fucking villain argument of like Cell. Basically, I feel like this should have been Cell versus Buu. I think it started out like that, but then it turned into side characters and Saga versus Saga. I would probably have to say Seth won, going off the points that you brought up. But
opinion, bro.
That's what I got from it.
Okay, I mean that's fair, man. You think Seth won? I think I won. I'm sure he thinks he wins. That's cool.
So wait, was the debate?
That was very good though. You surprised me. You surprised me for sure. I didn't think anyone was on the level.
You're entitled to your own opinion. Like I said, this is all opinion based. I just wish I understood better about the conclusion.
I mean, it started off well. I think it just kind of started to part towards the middle because, like, when you stayed on the whole Cell thing, and then it stayed on the whole absorption thing, and then like people were like jumping in, like Mayo and stuff.
Can I just tell you?
Hold on. But what was that supposed to be
actually about?
Well, I just want to say this. This isn't even relevant to the. It's kind of relevant to the debate, but you should know that I don't actually think the Buu saga is better than the Cell saga. That was just that was mainly just me trying to debate you on something. Like I was like, okay, yeah, I could definitely easily prove Jiren is better than the Cell games, but you seemed really mad about Buu, so I was just gonna argue the Buu saga from kind of like a devil's advocate position. So I don't actually think that. So don't like think that I actually think Cell is worse than Buu or something, all right?
Well, all I was saying though, Seth, and I mean, like I said, I could do this debate again in round 2 if you ever wanted to, or if you want to debate something else, I'm more than willing.
Well, I just told you I don't actually believe Buu is better, right? I said
no. Yeah. I'm just saying, I'm saying we could always debate something else too, because I have a lot of other things I can debate.
Yeah.
Also, to bring up, sorry, Quinn, about the whole rules thing. I mean, I guess we should have been more clear about that from the beginning.
Yeah, because I didn't fucking understand it, and then I also don't think it's fair to dock points for me bringing Mayo in because Mayo was the one who was talking shit in the chat. What the fuck was that?
I wasn't talking shit though. I was just countering some points.
Actually, speaking of Mayo, you guys should settle that now.
I don't think that's fair. 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 I don't think that's fair.